So let's look at the number one most popular talk on TED, Schools Kill Creativity by Sir Ken Robinson. What are the storyteller tactics that Sir Ken is using, and how could you do something like this? First of all, there's a strong story hook. There's irony built into the title and the theme of the talk.
You will never come up with anything original if you're not prepared to be wrong. And by the time they get to be adults, most kids have lost that capacity. They have become frightened of being wrong. And we run our companies this, by the way. We stigmatize mistakes. And we're now running national education systems where mistakes are the worst thing you can make. And the result is that we are educating people out of their creative capacities.
Schools are not meant to hold kids back, but they are. Why? Irony means, well, something that's not what it's supposed to be. And when you point this out to us, it's like you're offering us a puzzle, and that acts as an attention hook, pulling us into the story. And Sir Ken keeps using story hooks during the talk. Now, there are 6 different hooks on the story hooks card. Here are 2 more that Sir Ken uses. He says,
I believe this passionately that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it. Or rather, we get educated out of it.
That's ironic. Then he says,
suddenly, degrees aren't worth anything.
Wow. Well, that's unexpected coming from a professor. Half of Sir Ken's talk is actually comedy, and making your audience laugh is a great way to build a bond and to show your confidence. But it can also be high risk. A bad joke can be embarrassing or even offensive. So the safe way to poke fun is to poke fun at yourself. And notice in this talk how Sir Ken is mostly mocking himself and fellow professors. But there's also a genuine insight buried in the first joke.
What I find is everybody has an interest in education, don't you? I find this very interesting. If you're at a dinner party and you say you work in education, actually you're not often at dinner parties, frankly, if you work in education. But if you are, and you say to somebody, they say, what do you do? And you say you work in education, you can see the blood run from their face. They think, oh my God, why me? But if you ask people about their education, they pin you to the wall. Because it's one of those things that goes deep with people. Am I right?
When he's at a dinner party, nobody wants to listen to teachers like Sir Ken talk about their work in education. But when you ask anyone about their experience of school, they can't stop talking. That's funny. And there's a card called That's Funny that could help you find a similar moment in your work. The best jokes are what comedians call benign violations. In other words, I thought you meant X, then suddenly I realized you mean Y. So the best tip is just use your memory. Think back to a moment that made you laugh or even smile as you approached your work, and then use that moment to make us laugh or smile too. So that's 2 cards, story hooks, and that's funny. Here's a third. 3 is the magic number. Sir Ken organises his central message in 3s. And that's because it's hard for any audience who aren't taking notes to remember more than 3 things at once. So he identifies 3 themes running through the conference.
We need to radically rethink our view of intelligence. We know 3 things about intelligence. 1, it's diverse. Secondly, intelligence is dynamic. And the third thing about intelligence is it's distinct.
He uses 3 Ds to describe intelligence: diverse, dynamic, and distinctive. And 3 as the magic number shows you 3 ways to organise your own trio of ideas. So Sir Ken is using a kind of repeat 3 approach, making a list of 3 things, keeping it simple so we can all remember it. Remember, there was a house of straw that blew down, a house of sticks that blew down, and then there was a house of brick that stayed up. So you see the pattern: fail, fail, and then succeed. And this is called a setup and reverse. The first 2 instances establish a pattern. The third breaks it, and that gets our attention. It's simple and satisfying. Finally, let's go to the emotional heart of the talk, which is a story.
Really prompted by a conversation I had with a wonderful woman who most people have never heard of. She's called Gillian Lynn. She's a choreographer, and everybody knows her work. She did Cats. When she was at school, she was really hopeless. And the school in the 30s wrote to her parents and said, we think Gillian has a learning disorder. She couldn't concentrate. She was fidgeting. I think now they'd say she had ADHD, but this was the 1930s. Anyway, she went to see this, this specialist. So this oak-panelled room, and she sat on her hands for 20 minutes while this man talked to her mother about all the problems Gillian was having at school. The doctor went and sat next to Gillian and said, Gillian, I've listened to all these things that your mother's told me. I need to speak to her privately. But as they went out the room, he turned on the radio that was sitting on his desk. He said to her mother, just stand and watch her. And the minute they left the room, she said she was on her feet, moving to the music. And they watched for a few minutes, and he turned to her mother, and he said, you know, Mrs. Lynn, Gillian isn't sick, she's a dancer. Take her to a dance school. I said, what happened? He said, she did. I can't tell you how wonderful it was. She was eventually auditioned for the Royal Ballet School. She became a soloist. She had a wonderful career at the Royal Ballet, found her own company, the Gillian Dance Company, met Andrew Lloyd Webber. She's been responsible for some of the most successful musical theatre productions in history. She's given pleasure to millions, and she's a multi-millionaire. Somebody else might have put her on medication and told her to calm down.
In Sir Ken's case, it's the story of Gillian Lynn. This story shares the ingredients of a movie time story, which are action, emotion, and meaning. Action, here's Gillian struggling at school. Here she is dancing in the psychologist's office. Emotion, Gillian's teachers are angry, her mum is worried. Meaning, forcing all kids to learn in the same way is killing creativity. So this story gets a movie playing in our heads. You can see what Sir Ken means and why nurturing creativity matters. Now, you can use a movie time card to find the heart of your own story.